You know, usually when a company builds a product, there's this really strong expectation of certainty.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost like traditional engineering, right? You,
Right.
you have a blueprint, you build the feature, you launch it, and you just kind of assume your users will magically use it exactly how it was drawn up on the whiteboard.
Right, because it feels incredibly logical. You identify a gap in the market,
Yeah.
you engineer the solution, and then boom, they adopt the solution.
Yeah.
It's a very clean, rational narrative that we just love to tell ourselves in pitch decks and sprint planning meetings.
But then you actually release it into the wild. And suddenly, that neat little whiteboard drawing is, well, it's completely irrelevant.
Totally out the window.
Exactly. You find out your users are completely bypassing your beautifully designed main feature, and instead they are, I don't know, hacking some secondary settings button to do something you never even intended.
Yeah, we are looking at a product landscape that is, let's be real, murky at best.
Mhm.
It is the absolute definition of the product reality gap. We desperately want things to be predictable because, predictability is easy to manage. It's easy to fund.
Yeah, investors love predictable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But human behavior rarely fits into a clean JIRA ticket.
Which brings us to our mission for today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking a stack of UX research briefs, specifically focusing on user methods and product development, and uncovering how to basically stop flying blind.
And this is such an important topic.
It really is. Our goal isn't to just rehash the textbook definitions of these tools. If you were listening to this, you likely already know the vocabulary.
Right.
We are here to unpack how these methods are actually meant to be used dynamically, not just as, mere documentation to sit in a shared drive somewhere, but as sharp, strategic instruments that turn all those fuzzy, vague beliefs about your users into accurate product judgment. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. Because the foundational problem we see over and over across the industry is that teams, they love to claim they are user-centered.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge buzzword.
They wear like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Right? Putting on their careers page their company values. But in reality, they are still making their most expensive high-stakes decisions based on internal perspectives or incomplete assumptions or...
Oh, just really surface-level feedback.
Exactly. Feedback from, like, a vocal minority of users.
Okay, because that phrase, fuzzy beliefs, it really sticks out to me.
Yeah.
When a team is operating in the dark like that, leaning on these vague assumptions, what actually happens on a Tuesday morning at a tech company? Like, what is the visceral danger of having a blurry idea of who you are building for?
Well, the danger is that you introduce massive systemic product risk, and it usually disguises itself as productivity.
It disguises itself. How so?
Well, when your understanding of the user, their actual needs, their motivations, the specific context where their experience breaks down when that understanding is weak, absolutely everything downstream suffers.
Right.
You start to see engineering tickets piling up for features that, frankly, sales can't even explain to a customer.
Oh.
Priorities drift from week to week. And the product messaging becomes incredibly generic.
Because the marketing team is trying to speak to everyone.
Exactly. Which means they resonate with absolutely no one.
So instead of targeting a specific problem, you are just building this, I don't know, Frankenstein product based on imagined behaviors.
Yeah.
It makes me think of, like, aiming a multi-million-dollar satellite telescope, but the lens is just slightly smudged. You look through it, you see a shape, and you confidently declare, that's a rocky terrain.
Right, right.
So you spend the whole year building landing gear for solid rock. But because the lens was blurry, you miss the fact that the surface is entirely liquid ocean.
And your landing gear is useless.
Your brilliantly engineered landing gear is going to sink immediately. I mean, if your foundational understanding is blurry, the solutions might sound incredibly smart in the boardroom, but they'll be an absolute disaster in real use.
That is a perfect analogy. And the tragic part is the engineering team will be blamed for building the landing gear too slowly.
Always.
When the real failure was myth-identifying the planet in the first place. This is exactly why journey problems are often misread entirely by product organizations. They completely lack the actual human context.
Because they're just looking at numbers.
Yes. A team looking at analytics might know what a user is doing. They can see the metrics showing, say, the 90% drop-off on the checkout page.
Right.
But data without context is just noise. They have absolutely no idea why the user is abandoning the cart. And without the why, you are literally just throwing new UI designs at the wall and hoping one sticks.
So if vagueness is the ultimate enemy here and a smudged lens leads to building the wrong landing gear, how do we actually get clarity? How do we swap out that smudged lens for something that, actually shows us the water?
Well, this is where we bring in the arsenal of user methods outlined in the research. But, and this is crucial, the shift in mindset here is that these methods are not interchangeable templates. They are not just worksheets you fill out to appease middle management.
Hmm.
Each method is a unique lens that reveals a totally different layer of user reality. You have to combine them to actually see the full picture.
Okay, let's get into how these lenses actually shift a team's perspective. I really want to start with jobs to be done because this is one I hear thrown around constantly, but I have to push back on it slightly.
Just go for it.
Isn't a jobs to be done list basically just a disguised feature list?
Not if it's done right.
Well, like if the job is I need to export this data, how is focusing on that quote unquote progress actually any different from an engineering ticket that just says build and export data button?
It's a really common trap. It's a trap a lot of veteran teams fall into, actually. They use the terminology of jobs to be done, but they apply it to the implementation rather than the
It's your
motivation.
motivation.
Right. The distinction is entirely about the underlying goal. If you just put export data on a feature list, your engineers will do exactly what you asked.
They'll build a CSV download button.
Exactly. Job done, right?
Right. The user gets their data. Problem solved.
But if you actually investigate the job to be done, which the framework defines as the progress the user is trying to make in their specific circumstance, you might uncover something totally different.
Like what?
You might find out they're exporting that CSV data just so they can spend 2 hours formatting it in Excel purely to generate a pie chart for their weekly team meeting.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the job isn't exporting data at all.
Nope.
The job is looking smart and prepared in front of their boss with a visual report.
Yes. And because you understand that underlying goal, you don't even bother building the CSV export button. Instead, you build an automated, beautifully formatted weekly report feature right inside your dashboard that they can email to their boss with one single click.
That's amazing.
You solve their actual underlying anxiety rather than just building the mechanical feature they explicitly asked for. That is the difference. The feature list solves the symptom. The job to be done solves the core motivation.
That immediately changes the entire product roadmap. But okay, understanding the goal is only half the battle, right? Because the user still has to actually navigate the software to get that report.
Absolutely.
Which naturally leads us to journey maps. If jobs to be done tells us what progress they want, journey maps seem designed to show us exactly where they stumble trying to get there.
Journey maps visualize the temporal reality of the user. We tend to design in static screens, but users experience products over time.
Right, it's a sequence.
Exactly. The journey map forces the team to look at the liminal spaces, the handoffs between the mobile app and the desktop, or the friction of waiting 20 minutes for a confirmation email. It highlights those highly vulnerable moments of uncertainty where the user is just sitting there asking, did that work? Am I going to be charged twice?
I've definitely had that exact panic. But a journey map is still somewhat operational, right? It shows us the sequence and the friction points. But if we see a user getting stuck at a specific step, how do we figure out what is actually going through their head in that exact moment?
That is where you layer on an empathy map.
Okay.
If the journey map is the when, the empathy map is the what are they carrying. It details what users are actually feeling, what they're noticing in their physical environment, and the baggage they bring to the interaction.
Can you give me an example of how an empathy map changes a tangible design choice? Because, empathy can sound a bit soft for a hard-charging engineering team.
Sure. Let's look at a real-world scenario. Let's say your analytics show a high rate of quote-unquote rage clicking on a specific mobile payment button.
Okay, that's your data.
Right. And your journey map tells you this happens right at the very end of the checkout flow. But when you actually do the empathy work, you discover that your target user is often an overwhelmed parent trying to buy baby formula on their phone with one hand while holding a screaming toddler in the other.
Oh, man. The physical context changes everything.
Completely. Suddenly, you aren't just trying to make the button, a prettier shade of blue. You realize the hit state of the button needs to be massive, and the feedback mechanism needs to be immediate and glaringly obvious because the user's cognitive load is completely maxed out.
You're designing for a distracted, stressed human, not a perfect, focused robot.
Exactly.
That makes the concept of mental models even more critical then, because that overwhelmed parent has a completely different expectation of how things should work compared to, say, The developer sitting in a quiet office with two giant monitors.
You hit the nail on the head. Mental models expose the crucial friction between how your team thinks the product works and how the users actually expect it to work.
Right.
Imagine a team building a highly sophisticated multi-select data filtering interface. They are deeply proud of the taxonomy and the complex Boolean logic they've implemented.
I think it's a masterpiece.
Yeah. But the user's mental model for finding information is entirely based on the Google search bar. They just want to type a messy natural language question into a single empty box.
So the team is solving for data taxonomy, but the user is solving for cognitive simplicity. They don't want to learn your complicated filter system, no matter how elegant the code is.
Precisely. And when you finally apply root cause analysis to these mismatches, you stop treating the surface level symptoms. A drop in signups isn't a marketing problem. It's a mental model mismatch.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is that when combined, these lenses shift a product team from a posture of constant exhausting reaction, putting out fires and blindly guessing at A/B tests, to a posture of true structural understanding.
But this brings up a massive contradiction that we really need to dive into.
Correct.
If these lenses, jobs to be done, journey mapping, empathy, mental models, if they are this powerful at unearthing reality, why do so many veteran, well-funded product teams still fail?
It's a great question.
I mean, we see catastrophic product launches constantly from companies that employ hundreds of UX researchers.
Yeah. This is the darkest corner of product development, which the source material accurately describes as the artifact graveyard.
The artifact graveyard.
Yes. The power of these methods gets completely neutralized because teams create these artifacts to satisfy corporate theater, not to actually drive strategy.
Corporate theater, basically creating the illusion of rigor. What does that actually look like when it plays out in an office?
Take personas, for example.
Right.
In a healthy organization, a persona structures your understanding around meaningful constraints. But in the artifact graveyard, a persona devolves into a fictional poster on the wall. It's, marketing Mark, age 32. He likes craft coffee and walks his golden retriever on weekends.
The classic demographic fluff.
Exactly. It has demographic summaries, but absolutely zero predictive power for how Mark will actually use your enterprise software.
Right. His dog doesn't dictate how he exports a CSV file.
Exactly. Or consider journey maps. A team will hold a massive, incredibly expensive 3-day offsite workshop. They will cover an entire wall in hundreds of colorful sticky notes.
Oh, I've been in those.
Right. And they will digitize it into a beautifully designed, incredibly dense PDF, and then it will sit in a Google Drive folder untouched for 2 years, having absolutely zero consequence on the Jira backlog.
It's essentially a bureaucratic defense mechanism, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If the product fails, the product manager can just point to the folder and say, hey, we did the research, we have the journey map, we are user-centered.
Yes. They are just dressing up their internal assumptions in fancy UX terminology. And one of the most fatal manifestations of this is confusing a user's preference with a user's need.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
When teams do surface-level empathy work, they often just ask users what they want. A user might say they strongly prefer a sleek, dark mode interface.
Sure.
So the team spends 3 sprints building dark mode. But what the user actually needed, the critical factor for their job to be done, was for the dashboard to load in under 2 seconds.
Oh, man. So they prioritized a cosmetic preference over a structural need, completely missing the point of doing research in the first place. So what does this all mean for the organization, then? Is doing the work like spending weeks making that highly detailed fictional persona poster, is that actually worse than doing nothing at all?
In almost every case, yes. Because it breeds false confidence.
False confidence.
Yeah. When a team does zero research, they at least know they are guessing. They tread carefully. They hedge their bets. But when a team has an artifact graveyard, they look exceptionally user-centered on paper. They are insulated from reality by their own beautiful, useless documents.
Wow.
They launch with total certainty, completely unaware that their foundational understanding is deeply, deeply flawed.
Which means when the launch eventually fails, they're completely blindsided. They thought they checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
To avoid that trap of false confidence, a team obviously has to use these methods dynamically. They can't just be static posters. So how do we move this from just avoiding a pitfall from avoiding the graveyard to actually utilizing this evidence to shape high-level business strategy?
Well, this requires a fundamental shift in how the organization views user research as a whole. The brief makes a very strong, unyielding case that user understanding must transcend the design team.
It can't just live with UX.
Exactly. It shapes far more than UI design details. It dictates the entire business strategy. Think about it. If you misunderstand the user, you inherently misunderstand the market. You misunderstand your own value proposition, and you completely miss your real point of differentiation.
Because your supposed point of differentiation might be built on solving a problem that doesn't actually exist, or at least, isn't a priority for the market to actually pay for.
Therefore, these methods are absolutely crucial for product managers, for founders, for executive strategists. They are not just specialized tools for UX researchers to play with in a silo. Anyone responsible for deciding where the company's capital and engineering hours should be invested needs to be looking through these lenses before writing a single line of code.
It's all about keeping the insights alive and forcefully connected to the actual building process. I noticed the source material highlights tools like Flowlytics as an example of bridging this gap.
Yes, exactly.
It's a mechanism to keep the personas, the temporal journeys, the raw user evidence, and the downstream engineering decisions tangibly connected. Because the moment these things become isolated, the second the user's root cause anxiety gets disconnected from the developer's JIRA ticket, they just lose all their power.
And to keep them connected, the organization has to embrace the progression of evidence.
Progression of evidence.
Yeah, you have to understand that early in a project, your models, your journey maps, your mental models, they're strictly provisional. They are educated assumptions based on the best available knowledge you have on day one. But a healthy, mature product development cycle requires that these models be constantly challenged.
It really makes me think of sketching a portrait. When you first start, you are just making light pencil marks on the canvas. Those early assumptions, the first draft of the persona, they are just pencil marks.
Right.
You have to be deeply willing to take out the eraser and draw completely new lines when the real evidence comes in from user testing. If you fall in love with your first draft and just ink over your initial bad sketch, you're going to end up with a terrifying portrait, no matter how good your ink is.
That is spot on. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that willingness to erase and redraw is the ultimate dividing line between successful tech companies and the ones that just fade away.
Yeah.
Better user understanding, continuously refined by hard evidence rather than ego, ultimately leads to defining the core problem more accurately. And when you define the problem accurately, the downstream effects are universally positive.
You build the right landing gear.
Exactly. You make better architectural choices, you ask sharper research questions, and you set a much stronger strategic direction for the whole company. Simply put, better user understanding leads to vastly better bets.
And in product development, you're always placing bets. Every sprint, every feature, every marketing campaign is a massive bet with your team's time and your investors' resources. You want those bets to be as highly educated as humanly possible, based on reality, not on a smudged telescope lens.
Which is why the continuous application of these lenses is completely non-negotiable. It's the only way to actually clear the lens.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it really all comes down to a fundamental transition, doesn't it? Moving from the sort of general, warm and fuzzy sympathy for the user to sharp evidence-based judgment.
That is the core takeaway. The purpose of user methods is never to fill a research folder. Their true value is realized only when they force a team to see reality more clearly, to confront their own internal assumptions honestly, and to choose their next strategic steps wisely.
It's all about improving the actual quality of your decisions. For you, listening right now, whether you are prepping for a high-stakes product roadmap meeting tomorrow, or you're a founder trying to figure out why your user growth has suddenly stalled, your greatest asset is your ability to ruthlessly distinguish between internal assumptions and real user evidence.
Absolutely.
Don't let a beautiful, highly polished artifact give you false confidence. Demand the evidence.
And, crucially, be willing to completely redraw the map when you discover that the territory doesn't match your assumptions.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you to ponder as we close out today's dive. If these methods are truly designed to expose the gap between how we think a product works and how users actually expect it to work, what happens when a team looks through these lenses and discovers that their entire flagship product is built on a fundamental misunderstanding?
It's a terrifying moment.
It really is.
Yeah.
Are most teams actually brave enough to throw out the beautiful journey map, scrap the code, and start over? Or do they just hang the fictional poster on the wall, cross their fingers, and look the other way?